Up to this point, we're pretty comfortable dealing with absolute value functions. We know how to evaluate an absolute value. We know what absolute values mean. We understand that it means the distance of the number away from zero. So these will typically be positive values. They can't be negative because distance can't be negative. But in this video, we want to look at what do they look like if you wanted to graph an absolute value function. Is it linear? Does it look like a parabola? You know, what shape does this graph have? We're going to unpack a lot of these details in some of the next videos. In this video, we're going to keep it really light and just look at just a very basic example of just the absolute value of x. All right, so to get this guy's graph, what we're going to do is just do a simple xy table. We're going to pick a few x's, find the y's that go with them, and plot the points. That'll show us what the graph looks like. Okay, so if these are the x's, let's plug in these x's into the absolute value function. The absolute value of -2 is, of course, +2. Absolute value of -1 is +1. Absolute value of 0 is 0. And the absolute value of 1 and 2 would be 1 and 2, of course. Okay, so we're going to plot these. So here's -2, 2. So that point, this ordered pair x, y, would be on this guy's graph. -1, 1, 0, 0. And notice up to this point, it looks like it's going to be linear because these are all lining up in a row, but that's going to change. If you look at the next point, it abruptly changes 1, 1. See, that just kind of took a totally left-hand turn there. And then 2, 2, of course, as well. Okay, and this is the typical absolute value graph. If you ask most people, what does the graph of an absolute value function look like? They'll tell you that it looks like a V. It's a V-shaped graph. Now, obviously, this is just the absolute value of x. If you had something to the effect of absolute value of x plus 3 or something like that, the graph would look a little different. What's going to wind up happening in the more complicated examples is your graph might be down here, or might be even reflected upside down, or maybe it's translated way up here. It could be moved around, reflected, maybe stretched or compressed, or things like that. But just remember, the basic absolute value graph is just a V-shaped graph. One last thing I'll mention before we close out this video. This point right here is going to be pretty important. Here's the origin, but in general, where the absolute value graph makes an abrupt turn is going to be called the vertex. Okay, so just keep that in mind, the vertex. So that knowing where the vertex is a big deal. If you know where the vertex is, that's going to reveal a lot about what the graph of the absolute value function might look like. So anyways, we'll get into some of these more involved details in the next video.